Tonight, America is mourning. We didn't just lose a star, we lost a legend, a piece of history.
The news arrived quietly, almost like a fading note at the end of a song. In the early hours, it was confirmed that Suki Lahav had passed away. For many, her name may not have filled headlines. But for those who knew her work, the silence she leaves behind feels deeply personal. How does someone move from one of the world's most iconic music stages to a life of quiet storytelling? And what happens when a voice that once carried through music finds a new home in words? Her story began far from the bright lights that would later surround her. Born and raised in Israel, Suki Lahav showed an early connection to music. The violin was not just an instrument to her, it became a language. One that spoke of emotion, identity, and a sense of belonging that she would carry across continents. In the 1970s, her journey took a remarkable turn. She joined E Street Band, performing alongside Bruce Springsteen during a defining moment in his early career. For a brief but unforgettable time, her violin added a haunting depth to the band's sound. A former bandmate once reflected, "She didn't just play notes, she filled the spaces between them." It was a quiet kind of artistry, but one that left a lasting mark. Yet even at the height of that global stage, something within her remained unsettled. The lights, the movement, the constant noise, it was not where her story would end. And so, in a decision that puzzled some, she stepped away. Why leave such a rare opportunity behind? The answer seemed to lie in her need for something more rooted, more personal. She returned to Israel, where her creative path began to shift. Music did not disappear from her life, but it slowly made room for something new. Words. Suki Lahav became a writer, a storyteller who explored human emotions with the same sensitivity she once brought to her violin. Her work in literature and journalism reflected a deep understanding of people, their struggles, their quiet victories, their unspoken thoughts. A reader once wrote, "Her stories feel like someone gently holding a mirror to your soul." It was not loud success. It was something quieter, and perhaps more lasting. As the years passed, she built a life that blended creativity with reflection. She became a respected voice in Israel's artistic community. Not through fame but through sincerity. There was a calmness to her presence. Friends described her as thoughtful, observant, and deeply compassionate. She listened more than she spoke, one close acquaintance shared. But when she did speak, you remembered it. And still a question lingered beneath it all. Did she ever miss the stage? Those who knew her best believed she carried it within her. Not as regret but as a chapter that shaped everything that followed. The music never left her, it simply changed form. In her later years, her work continued to reflect a life fully lived between two worlds. One of sound and one of silence. One of performance and one of reflection. Her passing now brings both of those worlds to a pause. Across social media and artistic circles, tributes have begun to appear. Some remember the violinist who once stood beside a rising legend. Others remember the writer who gave voice to quiet emotions. But perhaps the most powerful memory is the way she connected the two. She showed that art does not belong to one form. It moves. It evolves. It finds new ways to speak. In many ways, her life asks a gentle question of its own. Is success always found in the spotlight, or can it live just as strongly in the quiet corners of creativity? As the day moves forward, her absence feels like a soft echo, something that lingers even after the sound has faded. And yet her story does not end here. Through her music, her writing, and the lives she touched, Suki Lahav leaves behind something rare. A reminder that art is not always meant to be loud. Sometimes, it is meant to be felt. Her journey, shaped by courage and quiet reinvention, continues to inspire those who seek meaning beyond recognition. And somewhere in the space between a fading melody and a written word, her voice still remains. The news came without noise, almost hidden between the lines of a quiet morning. It was confirmed that Tony Rivers had passed away. For many, his name may not have echoed loudly in recent years, but his voice never truly disappeared. Who was the man behind those gentle harmonies? And how did a voice, often heard but rarely seen, come to shape an entire era of music. Long before the tributes began, Tony Rivers, born Douglas Anthony Thompson, was simply a young man drawn to sound. In post-war Britain, where music became a form of escape, he found himself surrounded by melodies that offered hope and connection. He did not chase attention. Instead, he chased perfection and harmony. In the 1960s, his journey found direction as he became part of Harmony Grass. Their music carried a soft, layered beauty. Songs like Move In a Little Closer, Baby were not just hits, they were moments. Moments where voices blended so smoothly they felt almost weightless. A fellow musician once said, "Tony didn't sing over others. He sang with them." It was a simple truth, but one that defined his entire career. As the music scene around him grew louder and more experimental, Tony Rivers remained devoted to the quiet strength of harmony. While others pushed for bold solos and attention, he refined the art of blending voices into something unified. And yet his story did not stay within one band. His talent soon carried him into collaborations with some of the most recognized names in British music. He worked closely with Cliff Richard, adding depth to recordings that would reach millions. He also lent his voice to projects involving Roger Daltrey, where his harmonies quietly supported powerful lead vocals. But even as he stood beside icons, he remained in the background. Why did he choose that path? Perhaps because, for him, music was never about being seen. It was about being felt. One studio engineer recalled, "When Tony stepped up to the mic, everything softened. You could hear the emotion before you even understood the words." It was not just technical skill. It was something deeper, something human. Through the decades, his voice became part of recordings that listeners would return to again and again. Even they did not know his name. But they knew the feeling. There is a certain kind of artist whose work becomes invisible in the best way. It blends so perfectly into the whole that it feels essential, yet unnoticed. Tony Rivers was one of those rare artists. As time moved on, the spotlight shifted to new sounds and new faces. But Tony continued his work with quiet dedication. Recording, arranging, supporting, always present even when unrecognized. And still a question remained. Did he ever wish for more recognition? Those close to him suggest he understood something many do not. That true impact is not always measured in fame but in how deeply something is felt. His music lived in memories, in car rides, in quiet evenings, in moments people could not fully explain. As news of his passing spread, tributes began to surface. Not loud or dramatic but sincere. One fan wrote online, "His voice was part of my childhood. I didn't know his name then, but I'll never forget the feeling." Another shared, "He made songs feel complete. Like something was missing without him." Even fellow musicians paused to reflect. A longtime collaborator simply said, "We've lost one of the finest harmony voices of our time." There is a quiet sadness in realizing how many moments his voice has touched. How many memories carry a piece of his work without ever naming it. And perhaps that is his legacy. Tony Rivers helped define a sound that valued togetherness over individuality. A sound where voices supported each other rather than competed. In a world that often celebrates the loudest presence, he chose balance. In his later years, he remained connected to music, not as a performer chasing the stage, but as an artist honoring his craft. There was peace in that. A sense of completion. Now, as the music continues without him, something subtle has changed. A layer once always there now feels absent. And yet his voice still lives on. In recordings that continue to play. In harmonies that still move listeners. In songs that feel fuller because of what he gave them. His passing closes a chapter but not the story. Because somewhere in the background of a familiar melody, Tony Rivers is still there. Not leading, not demanding attention, but holding everything together. And perhaps that is the most lasting kind of voice. The one you may not always notice, but could never replace. The news came quietly, yet it carried the weight of decades. It was confirmed that Richard Chamberlain had passed away. For generations, his face and voice had filled living rooms across the world, becoming a familiar presence in stories that shaped the television landscape. But what made him so unforgettable? How did one actor capture hearts across continents? And what was it about his performances that left such a lasting mark? Born in 1934 in Beverly Hills, Chamberlain grew up at a time when television was just beginning to define popular culture. His early love for the arts was evident, yet no one could have predicted the quiet magnetism that would soon draw viewers into his performances. Even before fame, there was a sense of poise and presence that set him apart. He first gained widespread recognition in the 1960s with the role of Dr. Kildare, a young and compassionate physician whose struggles and triumphs resonated deeply with audiences. For many, seeing Chamberlain on screen was more than entertainment. It was a connection to a world of empathy and human emotion. Watching him, you didn't just see the character. You felt him, one longtime fan shared. It was a sentiment echoed by colleagues, who admired his dedication to bringing authenticity to every role. His performances carried a depth that made even small moments linger in memory. Yet Chamberlain's career was far from confined to a single role. He became a defining presence in miniseries like Shogun and the Thorn Birds, productions that brought sweeping stories into homes worldwide. In these epic tales, his elegance and gravitas drew viewers into emotional landscapes that felt both intimate and monumental. Despite the scale of these productions, he never allowed fame to overshadow craft. Directors and co-stars often spoke of his quiet professionalism, the care with which he approached every scene, every line, every pause. It was this combination of discipline and subtle charm that earned him multiple awards and nominations throughout his long career. And yet, behind the accolades, Chamberlain remained remarkably private. His personal life was guarded, revealing little to the public, but his work spoke volumes. The humanity in his performances mirrored the humanity he quietly carried off-screen, a reminder that vulnerability and strength often exist side by side. In reflecting on his legacy, one co-star noted, "He had the rare ability to make the extraordinary feel familiar, like someone you've known your whole life." That ability became a hallmark of his career. Whether playing a romantic lead, a historical figure, or a complex protagonist, Chamberlain invited viewers into worlds that were larger than life, yet grounded in authenticity. As television evolved through the decades, he adapted without ever losing the core of his appeal. From classic dramas to guest appearances in later series, he maintained the same emotional precision that had defined his early work. There was a consistency to his craft, a dedication to storytelling that few could match. Public tributes have since highlighted the enduring impact of his presence. Fans remembered how his performances offered comfort, inspiration, and a touch of elegance in a rapidly changing world. His characters had a dignity you don't see anymore, one tribute read. Another reflected, "Watching him on screen felt like coming home." And while his passing marks the end of a personal era, it also marks a chapter in television history itself. Chamberlain's work helped shape the medium, setting a standard for depth, sophistication, and emotional resonance. His influence is visible not only in the shows he starred in, but in the generations of actors and viewers who learned from his example. There is a quiet reflection in knowing that such an enduring figure has left the stage. Yet the stories remain. The characters he brought to life continue to live in the collective memory of audiences worldwide. Each line, each gesture, each scene carries a piece of his artistry forward. In the world of classic television, few names shine as brightly as Richard Chamberlain's. He showed that drama could be more than spectacle. It could be an exploration of the human heart. Through decades of work, he taught audiences to feel, to hope, and to connect. His legacy endures not just in awards or accolades, but in the quiet moments of connection he created. In living rooms across generations, his performances remain a testament to the power of grace, dedication, and emotional honesty. Even as we say farewell, his influence lingers. The era he helped define continues to inspire, reminding us that the best television tells not only a story, but also the story of our shared humanity. And somewhere in every heartfelt scene he left behind, Richard Chamberlain's voice, presence, and elegance will never fade.